They looked at our primitive rockets and laughed. They saw our divided nations and smiled. They counted our nuclear weapons and called us weak. Then they gave us 24 hours to surrender, and learned why apex predators don't need permission to bite back. The Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Consortium fell silent as Ambassador Velkoth of the Zarthian Empire rose to address the assembly. His 7 eyes gleamed with satisfaction as he activated the holographic display, showing images of a small blue world orbiting an unremarkable yellow star. Esteemed members of the consortium, Velkoth began, his translator converting his clicking mandibles into the standard galactic tongue. For 3 cycles we have monitored this primitive species. They call themselves humans, and they inhabit the 3rd planet of the Sol system. Our analysis is complete, and I am here today to propose their immediate subjugation. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The consortium had not authorized a conquest in nearly 200 cycles. Most species were either welcomed as equals or left alone entirely. But Ambassador Velkoth continued with growing confidence. These humans are classified as a Type 0.7 civilization. They have barely achieved rudimentary space travel. Their longest vessel range extends only to their own planetary satellite. They possess nuclear technology, yes, but nothing compared to our plasma cannons or singularity weapons. Their military forces fight with chemical propellants and primitive explosives. In short, they are no threat whatsoever. He paused, letting his words sink in. More importantly, their world is rich in rare minerals essential to our manufacturing processes. The planet contains massive deposits of titanium, platinum, and most crucially, element 115 in concentrations we've never encountered elsewhere. The humans have barely scratched the surface of their own planet's wealth. A representative from the Quillian hive mind raised a tentacle. What of their culture? Their technology level is irrelevant if they possess strategic thinking or unusual warfare capabilities. Have we studied their history? Velkoth's expression, what passed for one in his species, showed amusement. We have indeed, representative. And what we found only confirms their weakness. These humans spend more time fighting amongst themselves than developing their civilization. In their most recent global conflict, merely 80 cycles ago by their reckoning, they slaughtered millions of their own kind over ideological differences. They are fractured into nearly 200 separate nations, constantly bickering over invisible lines they've drawn on their own planet. They cannot even agree on how to manage their own atmosphere. He gestured at the holographic display, which now showed images of human cities, human weapons, human soldiers. Look at them. They are soft, physically weak, with no natural armor, no venomous capabilities, no superior strength. Their soldiers require artificial protection just to survive their own planet's various climates. Their average lifespan is barely 70 cycles. They are short-lived, divided, and primitive. Another voice spoke up, this time from the Crystalline Collective. What of their response to our presence? Surely they have detected our observation vessels. They have not, Velkoth replied smugly. Our ships remain cloaked in high orbit. On the few occasions when their primitive sensors have detected anomalies, their own governments dismiss the evidence as weather phenomena or mass hysteria. They are willfully blind to the universe around them. The supreme arbiter of the consortium, an ancient being from the founding species, leaned forward in her crystalline throne. Her telepathic voice echoed in every mind present. You speak of conquest, Ambassador Velkoth. The consortium was founded on principles of cooperation and mutual prosperity. Why can we not simply trade with these humans? Velkoth bowed respectfully. With all due respect, Supreme Arbiter, these humans have nothing to offer us but their resources. Their technology is millennia behind ours. Their culture is chaotic and violent, and most importantly, they are expansionist by nature. Give them time and they will become a threat. Better to control them now while they are weak, and harvest their planet's resources for the good of the consortium. He pulled up more data. Our projections show that humans will not achieve faster than light travel for at least another 100 cycles, if ever. Their fractured political systems prevent unified scientific efforts. They waste their resources on primitive entertainment and internal conflicts. This is not a species destined for the stars. This is a species ripe for subjugation. The chamber erupted in discussion. Representatives argued back and forth. Some spoke of the moral implications. Others calculated the profit potential. The military representatives of the Zarthian Empire spoke of the ease of such a campaign. 3 warships. Perhaps 4, would be sufficient to force the human surrender within days. Finally, after hours of debate, the Supreme Arbiter called for silence. A vote will be held. All those in favor of authorizing the Zarthian Empire to subjugate the human species and claim their planet's resources for the consortium. The vote was closer than Velkoth had hoped, but it passed. 53 in favor, 47 opposed. The Crystalline Collective and several other elder species had voted against the measure, but the majority ruled. "It is decided," the Supreme Arbiter announced, her telepathic voice heavy with something that might have been regret. "The Zarthian Empire is hereby authorized to bring the human species under consortium control. May the universe forgive us if we have judged wrongly." Velkoth bowed deeply, his victory complete. "We shall begin operations immediately, Supreme Arbiter. Within one cycle, the human homeworld will fly the banner of the consortium. This will be the easiest conquest in our empire's history." As the council chamber emptied, the Supreme Arbiter remained in her throne, staring at the holographic image of Earth spinning slowly in the void. Something about the small blue world unsettled her, though she could not articulate why. Perhaps it was the way the humans had spread across every environment on their planet, from frozen poles to scorching deserts. Perhaps it was the sheer diversity of their biosphere, which suggested a world that bred survivors. Or perhaps it was something else entirely. Something in the data that Ambassador Velkoth had overlooked in his eagerness for conquest, but the vote had been cast. The decision was made, and the Zarthian fleet was already preparing for departure. 3 weeks later, by Earth's reckoning, 15 Zarthian warships dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Sol system. Each vessel was over 3 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack a planet's crust. The fleet began its approach to Earth, confident and unhurried. Admiral Kreshitar commanded the fleet from the bridge of the inevitable victory. He had overseen 17 successful planetary subjugations in his career. This would be his 18th, and he expected it to be the easiest. "Scan the planet," he ordered. "Locate all major population centers and military installations." His tactical officer worked quickly. "Sir, detecting approximately 8 billion life forms on the surface. Major population centers identified on all major landmasses. Significant military presence detected in multiple locations. Nuclear stockpiles confirmed in at least 9 separate nations." Kreshitar nodded. "Predictable. They split their defenses just as Velkoth predicted. Transmit the ultimatum in all major human languages." The communication was broadcast across every radio frequency, every television channel, every digital network on Earth. The message was simple and direct. "Humans of Earth, you are hereby notified that your planet and species have been claimed by the Galactic Consortium. Resistance is futile. Surrender your weapons and prepare for integration into the consortium as a client species. You have 24 of your hours to comply. Failure to do so will result in the destruction of your major cities. This is your only warning." Kreshitar settled back in his command chair, expecting chaos. He expected the humans to flood the communication channels with pleas for mercy, demands for negotiation, or perhaps defiant last words before their inevitable surrender. What he did not expect was silence. For 2 full hours, there was no response from Earth whatsoever. No communications. No military mobilization that his sensors could detect. Nothing. "Tactical, are you certain our transmission reached them?" Kreshitar asked. "Positive, Admiral. The transmission was received on every active communication device on the planet." "They heard us. Then why aren't they responding?" His tactical officer studied his displays, confusion evident in his posture. "Sir, I'm not certain. There is some increased electromagnetic activity, consistent with their global communication networks being heavily utilized, but no directed response to our fleet." Kreshitar felt the first tickle of unease. Every species he had conquered before had responded immediately, with terror, anger, or desperate bargaining. But silence? That was new. "Perhaps they are in shock," his second-in-command suggested. "They are primitive. Perhaps they cannot comprehend what is happening." "Perhaps," Kreshitar agreed, though he wasn't convinced. "We wait, let the fear build." On Earth, the response was anything but shocked silence. Within minutes of the transmission, every major government had gone to maximum alert. Emergency sessions were called. Military forces mobilized, and something the Zarthians hadn't anticipated began to happen. Humanity started talking to each other. The United Nations General Assembly held an emergency session that lasted 18 straight hours. Representatives from nations that had been enemies for decades suddenly found common ground. Ancient rivalries were set aside. Ideological differences became irrelevant, because for the first time in human history, humanity faced a threat that made all their internal conflicts seem absurdly petty. The Americans contacted the Russians. The Chinese spoke with the Europeans. India reached out to Pakistan. Israel and its neighbors sat down together. Every space-capable nation pooled their data. Every military with strategic weapons coordinated their response. Every intelligence agency shared what they knew, and what they knew was frightening, but not paralyzing. General Rachel Morrison of the United States Space Force stood before a hastily assembled Joint Command Council, representatives from 40 nations attending via secure video link. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, "we've had eyes on these ships for 3 weeks. Ever since they entered the outer solar system, our deep space monitoring satellites have been tracking them. We've analyzed their approach vector, their engine signatures, everything we can detect, and I'm here to tell you, they're not as advanced as they think they are." A Russian admiral leaned forward. "Explain. Their ships are massive, yes. Their weapons are powerful. Our analysis suggests plasma-based energy weapons, possibly matter-antimatter missiles. But their approach has been slow. They're traveling at subliminal speeds now. That suggests their faster-than-light drive requires significant cooldown time, or can't operate close to a gravity well, which means they can't just jump away if things go badly." A Chinese general spoke up. "What about their defenses?" "That's the interesting part," Morrison replied. "Our best telescopic analysis shows they have energy shielding, but it appears to be optimized for space debris and energy weapons. We don't think they're prepared for kinetic weapons. Why would they be? Most advanced species probably abandoned kinetic projectiles thousands of years ago. But we haven't," a British representative noted with grim satisfaction. "No, we haven't," Morrison agreed. "We've got railguns that can fire projectiles at a significant fraction of light speed. We've got missiles with multiple independently targetable warheads. We've got nuclear weapons. And most importantly, we've got over 8 billion angry, scared humans who have spent their entire evolutionary history learning how to kill things that are bigger and stronger than we are." She pulled up a holographic display showing Earth's defensive assets. "We have 372 nuclear-capable submarines currently deployed. We have over 4,000 strategic nuclear warheads ready to launch. We have kinetic orbital platforms that we've been quietly building for the last 20 years. We have railgun installations at every major spaceport, and we have millions of soldiers who are very, very good at fighting." A French general raised a concern. "But can we reach their ships? They are in high orbit." "We can," Morrison confirmed. "We have heavy-lift rockets that were designed for Mars missions. We can retrofit them with nuclear payloads and have them launch ready in 6 hours. We also have our orbital defense platforms, which these aliens apparently didn't notice. They're not much, repurposed satellite weapons, but they're already in position." The Secretary General of the United Nations, a woman named Amara Okonkwo, spoke for the first time. "General Morrison, are you suggesting we fight?" "Ma'am, I'm suggesting we have options. These aliens think we're primitives. They think we're divided and weak. They gave us 24 hours because they expect us to spend it arguing with each other or panicking in the streets. They don't expect us to be coordinating a military response, Wakey, but can we win?" someone asked. Morrison was quiet for a moment. "I don't know. But I do know this. Humanity has never rolled over for bullies. We've faced ice ages, plagues, world wars, and near-extinction events. We survived them all. These aliens are about to learn what happens when you threaten a species that conquered its own planet through sheer stubborn refusal to die." The council voted. It wasn't unanimous. Some argued for negotiation, for surrender, for buying time. But the majority voted to fight. Not because they were certain of victory, but because surrender to an enemy who saw them as resources to be harvested was unthinkable. The message went out to every military force on Earth: prepare for engagement. "We strike first." Admiral Kreshtar was reviewing tactical displays when his sensor officer suddenly stiffened. "Sir, detecting massive energy signatures from the planet's surface. Multiple launch events counting 50, 100, 200 separate launches and climbing." "What?" Kreshtar leaped to his feet. "Impossible!" "They were supposed to surrender." "They're not surrendering, sir. They're attacking. The holographic display lit up with hundreds of tracks as Earth's missiles climbed toward orbit. Chemical rockets, crude by Zarthian standards but numerous and accelerating fast. All ships activate defensive screens. Point defense systems to maximum. How long until impact? 12 minutes for the first wave, sir. Kreshitar watched the display with growing disbelief. The humans had military systems he hadn't detected? No, these were civilian launch systems repurposed. They were using their space program infrastructure as weapons platforms. Primitive but clever, he admitted. No matter. Our point defense will handle it. Those chemical rockets can't penetrate our shields. But even as he spoke, he noticed something odd. The missiles weren't following standard ballistic trajectories. They were maneuvering, using course corrections, spreading out to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Sir, these missiles have guidance systems. They're actively targeting different ships in the fleet. Acknowledged. All ships prepare point defense fire. We'll swat them down before they get close. The first wave of missiles entered engagement range. Zarthian point defense lasers opened fire. Brilliant beams of coherent light lancing out to intercept the incoming threats. Missiles exploded in brilliant fireballs as the defensive systems did their job. Kreshitar allowed himself a smile. As expected. These humans are, sir, second wave detected. These are different, much faster. Accelerating at by the ancients, they're accelerating at 50 gravities. Railgun projectiles launched from ground and orbital platforms crossed the distance in seconds. Simple tungsten rods, nothing more, but moving at incredible velocity. The kinetic energy they carried was devastating. The first projectile struck the Valiant Conquest amidships. The energy shields, designed to disperse plasma and deflect lasers, did absolutely nothing against solid matter traveling at 30 kilometers per second. The tungsten rod punched through the shield like it wasn't there. Through the hull, through 3 internal decks, and out the other side, leaving a perfectly cylindrical hole that immediately began venting atmosphere. Shields ineffective against kinetic weapons. Someone screamed. How are they ineffective? Because you never thought about it. A part of Kreshitar's mind answered. Because every civilized species abandoned primitive kinetic weapons millennia ago. Because you assumed these humans would fight like you do. More railgun rounds struck home. The Eternal Glory took 5 hits in rapid succession, its reactor containment failing catastrophically. The ship exploded in a brilliant flash, taking 600 Zarthian souls with it. Evasive maneuvers, Kreshitar roared. All ships random evasive patterns? Return fire on those launch sites. The Zarthian fleet began firing at the planet's surface, plasma beams lancing down to incinerate the sources of those devastating railgun attacks. Mountaintop installations vanished in clouds of superheated rock. Orbital platforms exploded under concentrated fire, but the damage was done. The humans had landed first blood. More importantly, they had shattered the illusion of Zarthian invincibility. Status report, Kreshitar demanded. 1 ship destroyed, 4 heavily damaged. Casualties estimated at over 2,000. Sir, the humans are launching another wave, and these look different. The missiles climbing toward orbit now were older, bulkier, but somehow more terrifying, because intelligence finally identified what they were. Nuclear weapons. The tactical officer whispered. They're launching nuclear weapons at us. Impossible. They wouldn't dare use nuclear weapons. The radiation, the fallout, they're launching them into space, sir. No atmospheric detonation. No fallout. They're using them against us. Kreshitar felt true fear for the first time in his military career. These humans were insane. They were using weapons that could poison their own planet, but doing it carefully, strategically, only in ways that wouldn't harm themselves. The nuclear missiles reached orbit. Point defense lasers intercepted many, but not all. The determined path took a direct nuclear hit, a 50-megaton warhead detonating against its shields. The shields held, barely, but the electromagnetic pulse fried every sensor on that side of the ship. Blinded and damaged, the determined path began falling out of formation. More nuclear weapons detonated in a carefully orchestrated pattern, creating a wall of radiation and electromagnetic interference that disrupted Zarthian sensors and communications. And in that moment of confusion, the humans struck again, detecting new launches from the planet's surface, smaller craft, high acceleration. There, sir, those are manned spacecraft. Kreshitar couldn't believe what his sensors were telling him. The humans were launching fighters. Actual manned fighter craft, like something from a primitive atmospheric combat doctrine. Who did that? Who risked pilots in space combat when drones and automated systems were available? The human fighters, retrofitted Mars shuttles with weapons hastily bolted on, screamed toward the Zarthian fleet. They were slow compared to the missiles, vulnerable, and their weapons were laughably primitive. But they were piloted by humans, and humans brought something to combat that no computer could match: creativity, desperation, and an absolute refusal to give up. The fighters engaged in close-range combat, using the debris field from destroyed missiles as cover. They fired railguns, missiles, and in one memorable case, a pilot rammed his fighter directly into the sensor array of a Zarthian cruiser, destroying the array and blinding the ship. "This is insanity," Kreshtar's second-in-command shouted. "They're sacrificing their pilots." But they weren't, not exactly. Most of the fighter pilots survived, their craft equipped with emergency escape pods. The humans had calculated that even a successful suicide run had better odds than sitting on Earth waiting for the Zarthians to bombardment their cities. The battle raged for 3 hours. The Zarthian fleet's superior firepower gradually began to tell. Human orbital platforms were destroyed. Fighter squadrons were decimated. Launch sites were reduced to slag, but the humans kept fighting. Every time Kreshtar thought the resistance was broken, another wave of missiles would launch. Another squadron of fighters would appear. Another railgun installation he hadn't detected would open fire. Finally, as his fleet's ammunition and power reserves began running critically low, Kreshtar made a decision he had never thought he would have to make. "All ships prepare to withdraw. We're leaving orbit, sir." His second-in-command stared at him in shock. "We're withdrawing," Kreshtar repeated, his voice hollow. "We've lost 5 ships and the remaining 10 are all damaged. We came here expecting an easy conquest. Instead, we've walked into a hornet's nest. These humans are more dangerous than any species I've ever encountered. We need to regroup, resupply, and return with overwhelming force." The Zarthian fleet began pulling back, their faster-than-light drives charging for the jump to safety. But even in retreat, the humans pursued them. The last thing Kreshtar saw before the jump was a human fighter, its pilot's face visible through the canopy, firing one last defiant burst at his flagship. The expression on that human's face, blood-streaked, exhausted, but absolutely unyielding, would haunt Kreshtar's dreams for the rest of his life. The Galactic Consortium received Admiral Kreshtar's report in stunned silence. The council chamber, so confident 3 weeks earlier, now felt the weight of a terrible mistake. Ambassador Velkoth stood pale and shaking as the casualty figures scrolled across the holographic display. 3,000 Zarthian soldiers dead, 5 warships destroyed, 10 more heavily damaged, all from a species that wasn't supposed to be able to fight back, but it was the recorded footage that truly shook the consortium members. Video from the battle showed human fighters dodging through plasma fire, human missiles maneuvering with impossible precision, human soldiers coordinating their defense with a speed and efficiency that belied their supposedly chaotic nature. The Supreme Arbiter watched the footage with ancient, sad eyes. "Show me the transmission," she commanded. A new hologram appeared. It was a message from Earth, transmitted to the fleeing Zarthian fleet. A human woman appeared, older, dark-skinned, wearing what appeared to be formal attire. The caption identified her as Secretary General Amara Okonkwo of the United Nations. "To the Galactic Consortium," she began, her voice calm but carrying an edge of steel. "You came to our world expecting easy prey. You saw a divided species and assumed we were weak. You saw primitive technology and assumed we were helpless. You made a grave miscalculation." She paused, and behind her images appeared, images of human history. Ancient battles, medieval sieges, world wars, images of humans fighting with spears, with swords, with muskets, with tanks, with aircraft, with nuclear weapons. "We are humans," Okonkwo continued. "We evolved on a death world, though we didn't know it at the time because we had nothing to compare it to. We climbed from the status of prey to apex predator through stubbornness and intelligence. We survived ice ages that should have killed us. We survived plagues that killed half our population. We survived global wars that saw us deploy weapons capable of ending all life on our planet, and we chose not to use them to their fullest extent." More images appeared. Humans climbing mountains, humans diving into ocean trenches, humans landing on their moon with technology that was primitive even by their own standards, just because they wanted to prove it could be done. You wanted to know what kind of species we are? We are the species that looked at every dangerous predator on our planet and decided which ones would make good pets. We are the species that invented agriculture, medicine, and art, and then used those same innovative minds to invent better and better ways to kill each other. We are persistence hunters who can track prey for days without stopping. We are endurance runners who can outlast animals built for speed. We are problem solvers who look at every obstacle as a puzzle to be solved. The images shifted to show the recent battle. Human fighters engaging ships thousands of years more advanced. Railguns striking with precision. Nuclear weapons deployed with surgical care to avoid harming their own planet. You made two critical mistakes, Okonkwo said. First, you assumed that because we fight amongst ourselves, we cannot unite against external threats. But humans are tribal by nature. We fight with our family members, but we will die to protect them from outsiders. Every petty conflict, every border dispute, every ideological difference, they all became meaningless the moment you threatened our species. She leaned forward, and her eyes held no mercy. Your second mistake was worse. You assumed that primitive technology meant primitive thinking. You looked at our nuclear weapons, our chemical rockets, our kinetic weapons, and you dismissed them as crude. But we didn't develop these weapons because we're stupid. We developed them because they work. And we've spent thousands of years learning how to use them with devastating efficiency. The Secretary General straightened. You asked us to surrender, to accept subjugation, to become a client species mining resources for your consortium. Here is our answer. No, not now, not ever. We are humans and we bow to no one. Behind her, more images appeared, images of humans rebuilding from the battle, images of new weapons being constructed, images of space vessels being retrofitted for combat, and ominously, images of human scientists studying the wreckage of destroyed Zarthian ships. You brought us your technology, Okonkwo said with a slight smile. Your shields, your weapons, your faster-than-light drives. Your ships are littered across our orbital space now, and we are very good at reverse engineering. Give us 10 years, maybe 20, and we'll be coming to visit you. Not as conquerors, not as destroyers, but as equals who will accept nothing less than respect. She paused one final time. But here's what I truly want you to understand. We didn't ask for this war. We didn't want it. We would have welcomed you as friends, as trading partners, as fellow inhabitants of this galaxy. You chose to see us as resources to be exploited. You chose to see us as weak. You chose to attack. Her voice dropped to something cold and hard. So here's our message to the Galactic Consortium. Congratulations. You only declared war on the most deadly species in the galaxy. We are humans. We are survivors. We are fighters. We are innovators. And we have just learned that we are not alone in the universe. The image faded to show a final scene. Earth hanging in space, battered but unbowed. And around it, thousands of ships under construction, weapons being forged, a species that had just taken its first violent step into a larger universe. We'll be seeing you soon, Okonkwo's voice concluded. We suggest you prepare accordingly. The transmission ended. The consortium chamber sat in absolute silence. Finally, the Crystalline Collective's representative spoke. We warned you. The humans' history was available for study. Every species that underestimated them paid the price, including their own rival nations. They are not strong because of their technology. They are strong because they refuse to stop fighting. Ambassador Velkoth found his voice. They're still primitive. We can assemble a larger fleet, blockade their system, starve them out. You don't understand, the Supreme Arbiter interrupted. Her ancient voice was heavy with resignation. We have lost this war already. Oh, we could certainly destroy Earth. We could bombard it from orbit until nothing lives. We could crack their planet like an egg. But look at what they accomplished with primitive technology. Look at their innovation, their coordination, their absolute refusal to accept defeat. She gestured at the tactical displays. They've been a spacefaring species for less than a century. In that time, they've gone from crude chemical rockets to the beginnings of interplanetary colonization. They've gone from simple computers to artificial intelligence. They've gone from basic nuclear weapons to precision antimatter research. Their rate of technological advancement is exponential, faster than any species we've ever encountered. The Supreme Arbiter stood, her crystalline form catching the light. We have three choices. We can try to destroy them now, which will cost us dearly and unite every human behind a banner of revenge. We can try to contain them, which will only motivate them to break free. Or we can do what we should have done from the beginning. We can make peace. We can trade with them, learn from them, and accept them as equals. Equals, Velkoth sputtered. They're primitives. They're survivors, the Supreme Arbiter corrected. There is a difference, and I suggest we learn it quickly, because in 50 cycles, maybe less, they will be out here among the stars. And when they arrive, I want them to remember us as species who extended hands in friendship, not as enemies who tried to conquer them. She looked around the chamber. All those in favor of opening peaceful diplomatic relations with humanity? The vote was unanimous. Even Velkoth, humiliated and shaken, raised his hand in assent. It is decided, the Supreme Arbiter declared. We will send an ambassador to Earth, one who understands what we learned today, that humanity is not a species to be trifled with. They are warriors, yes, but they are also builders, dreamers, and explorers. They could be the greatest allies we've ever had, or the most terrible enemies. Let us ensure they become the former. 6 months later, a single consortium vessel approached Earth. It broadcast peace on all frequencies, its weapons powered down, its shields lowered. It carried Ambassador Sylvari of the Crystalline Collective, one of the founding species of the consortium. Ancient and wise, the humans allowed the ship to approach, though it was tracked by enough weapons to vaporize it 100 times over. Trust, it seemed, would take time to rebuild. Ambassador Sylvari was escorted to the same United Nations building, where humanity had coordinated their defense. She stood before the General Assembly, and when she spoke, her voice carried humility. Humans of Earth, she began, I come before you to offer an apology. The consortium made a grievous error in judgment. We looked at your species and saw only what we wanted to see, a primitive civilization ripe for exploitation. We did not see what we should have seen, a remarkable species that had overcome incredible odds to reach for the stars. She paused, her crystalline form refracting the light into rainbow patterns. We have been exploring the galaxy for thousands of your years. We have encountered hundreds of species, but we have never encountered a species quite like yours. Your capacity for violence is matched only by your capacity for compassion. Your tendency toward conflict is balanced by your ability to cooperate when it truly matters. You are survivors in the truest sense. Secretary General Okonkwo stood to respond. We appreciate your words, Ambassador. But words are not enough. Your consortium voted to conquer us. They sent a fleet to subjugate us. Thousands died in the battle. Our trust is not easily given now. Nor should it be, Sylvari agreed. Trust must be earned. So let me tell you what the consortium is prepared to offer. First, full membership with voting rights equal to any founding species. Second, access to our scientific databases and technology, including faster-than-light travel. Third, a non-aggression pact that guarantees your sovereignty. And fourth, reparations for the damage caused by the Zarthian fleet. She stepped forward. But more than that, we offer you something we have rarely offered before. An equal partnership. You have proven yourselves as warriors. Now prove yourselves as diplomats, as scientists, as explorers. Show us what humanity can accomplish when given the resources of the galaxy. The General Assembly debated for days. Some argued for rejection, for isolationism, for keeping humanity focused on their own development. But the majority recognized the opportunity for what it was. Humanity voted to accept the consortium's offer. Over the following years, human ships began traveling the stars. Human scientists made breakthroughs that astounded the consortium. Human diplomats negotiated treaties. Human soldiers served alongside consortium forces as peacekeepers. And everywhere they went, humans carried with them a reputation. They were the species that had stood alone against a superior force and refused to break. They were the species that turned their greatest weakness, their fractured, competitive nature, into their greatest strength. They were survivors, fighters, innovators. They were, in short, exactly what they had always been: human. 20 years after first contact, Ambassador Velkoth stood once again before the Consortium Council. He was older now, humbler, and serving as the consortium's ambassador to Earth, a posting that had taught him more than any military campaign ever had. I come before you today, he announced, to report on the human integration into the consortium. In 2 decades, they have exceeded every expectation. They have established colonies on 3 worlds. They have contributed 17 major scientific breakthroughs. They have helped negotiate peace in conflicts that have lasted for centuries. He paused. But more than that, they have reminded us of something we had forgotten. They have reminded us what it means to fight for something beyond yourself, what it means to refuse to accept defeat, what it means to look at the stars and dare to reach for them, even when everyone tells you it's impossible. Belkoth bowed to the assembly. I was the one who recommended their conquest. I was the one who called them primitive and weak. I was wrong. Humanity is not primitive. They are young. There is a difference, and in their youth they possess a fire, a determination, that many of us have lost in our long ages. The Supreme Arbiter nodded approvingly. What is your recommendation, Ambassador? That we continue to welcome them as full partners. That we learn from them even as we teach them. That we remember the lesson Earth taught us. Never underestimate a species based on their technology level alone. The true measure of a species is not how advanced their weapons are, but how fiercely they fight to protect what matters to them. The Council voted unanimously to continue the partnership. On Earth, Secretary General Okonkwo, now retired but still influential, stood before a statue that had been erected in honor of those who had died defending humanity's freedom. The memorial was simple but powerful. A human figure reaching toward the stars, one hand holding a weapon, the other extended in friendship. We almost lost everything that day, she said to the gathered crowd, a mixture of humans and aliens who had come to commemorate the anniversary of the battle. But we didn't lose because we refused to give up. Because when faced with the choice between submission and extinction, we chose a third option, defiance. She smiled, looking up at the stars visible in the darkening sky. Now look at us. 20 years later, and human ships travel the galaxy. Human scientists work alongside alien researchers. Human children grow up knowing they're part of something larger than one small planet. A young Zarthian officer stood in the crowd, one of the first to enlist in the Joint Consortium Human Defense Force. He raised his hand in the human salute, a gesture of respect that had become common across the consortium. We learned from you, he called out. We learned that strength isn't just about superior weapons or advanced technology. It's about the will to survive, the courage to stand up, the wisdom to know when to fight and when to extend peace. Okonkwo nodded. And we learned from you. We learned we're not alone in the universe. We learned that there are wonders beyond our imagining waiting out there among the stars. We learned that different species with different values and different ways of thinking can find common ground if they're willing to try. She turned back to the memorial. To those who fell defending Earth, your sacrifice was not in vain. You saved humanity. But more than that, you showed the galaxy who we are. You showed them that humanity, messy, chaotic, stubborn humanity, deserves a place among the stars. The crowd stood in silence for a moment, humans and aliens alike paying respect to those who had died. Then as one, they turned toward the sky where the lights of orbital shipyards could be seen. Shipyards where the next generation of vessels was being built. Vessels designed by humans and aliens working together. Vessels that would carry explorers, not conquerors, into the unknown reaches of space. In the Zarthian Imperial Academy, a new course had been added to the military curriculum, the Earth Defense, a case study in asymmetric warfare. The instructor was Admiral Kreshtar himself, who had retired from active service to ensure that future officers would never repeat his mistakes. Today we study the Battle of Earth, Kreshtar began, addressing a classroom full of young cadets from a dozen different species. And the first thing I want you to understand is that we lost this battle before we ever engaged the enemy. We lost it in the planning phase when we underestimated our opponent. He activated a holographic display showing Earth. The humans were technologically inferior. This is an objective fact. Their fastest ships were barely capable of reaching their own moon. Their weapons were chemical and nuclear, primitive by our standards. Their military forces were divided among hundreds of separate nations. On paper, they should have surrendered within hours of our arrival. A Quillian cadet raised a tentacle. But they didn't, sir. Why not? Because we made the fundamental error of confusing technological advancement with military capability, Kreshtar replied. We looked at their weapons and saw primitives. We should have looked at their history and seen survivors. He pulled up images of human history. This species spent 200,000 years fighting to survive on a planet that actively tried to kill them. predators that could tear them apart, diseases that could wipe out entire populations, ice ages that covered half their planet in glaciers. And yet they survived, not by being the strongest or the fastest, but by being the most adaptable. More images appeared, images of human innovation. When they encountered prey animals faster than them, they invented the spear. When they faced predators stronger than them, they invented the bow. When they needed to cross oceans, they built ships. When they wanted to fly, they built aircraft. Every problem they encountered, they solved through innovation and determination. Kreshtar paused at an image of human soldiers in battle. And most critically, they learned to cooperate in ways few species have matched. Human pack bonding is legendary now. But at the time, we dismissed their fractured political systems as a weakness. We didn't understand that humans are simultaneously individual and collective. They compete fiercely with each other, yes, but when threatened from outside, they unite with terrifying efficiency. A young Zarthian cadet spoke up. But sir, we had superior weapons, superior shields, superior everything. How did they overcome that? By not fighting the way we expected them to fight, Kreshtar answered. We expected them to surrender or to engage us in conventional space combat. Instead, they used every advantage they had. They used their numerical superiority, 8 billion potential soldiers. They used their industrial capacity, entire factories retooled for war production in days. They used their creativity, turning civilian spacecraft into weapons platforms, using technologies we had dismissed as obsolete to devastating effect. He pulled up footage from the battle. Look at this. A human fighter pilot flying a craft that was designed for Mars exploration, modified with weapons in a matter of hours. His ship is slow, his weapons are weak, and he knows he probably won't survive the mission, and yet he flies directly into our point defense fire to get close enough for a killing shot. The cadets watched in silence as the human fighter dodged plasma fire, took critical damage, and still managed to fire a railgun burst that destroyed a sensor array before ejecting in an escape pod. That is not the action of a primitive, Kreshtar said quietly. That is the action of a warrior who values his cause more than his life. Every single human who fought that day knew they might die. Many did die. But not one of them hesitated. Not one of them ran. They fought with a ferocity that I have never encountered before or since. He turned off the display. The second lesson is about technology. We assumed that superior technology guaranteed victory. We were wrong. The humans taught us that technology is merely a tool. The true weapons are strategy, creativity, and will. Another image appeared. This one showing human nuclear weapons detonating in space. They used nuclear weapons against us. Weapons that could have poisoned their own planet if misused. But they didn't misuse them. They deployed them with surgical precision, creating electromagnetic interference that blinded our sensors and disrupted our communications. They turned weapons of mass destruction into tactical tools. A crystalline cadet asked, "What should we have done differently, sir?" Kreshtar was quiet for a long moment. We should have tried diplomacy first. We should have studied their culture more carefully. We should have recognized that any species that survives to reach space on a planet as harsh as Earth is a species to be respected, not conquered. But most of all, we should have remembered the first rule of warfare. Never underestimate your enemy. He looked around at his students. You are the next generation of consortium military officers. Some of you may serve alongside human soldiers. Others may command mixed species units. All of you need to understand what we learned that day. The measure of a species is not in their technology, but in their spirit. The humans had inferior technology, but superior spirit. And in the end, spirit won. The class ended, and as the cadets filed out, a young human cadet, one of the first to attend the Imperial Academy, approached Kreshtar. Sir, she said, I wanted to thank you for teaching this course, for being honest about what happened. Kreshtar looked at her. So young, barely 20 Earth years old, and already training to serve in the Consortium Defense Forces. Your species taught me the most important lesson of my career, cadet. The least I can do is ensure that lesson is not forgotten. She saluted, and he returned it. As she left, Kreshtar returned to his office, where he kept a personal memento from the battle. A piece of debris from a human fighter, scarred and burned, with words painted on the side in English. He had learned to read the language over the years. The words said not one step back. It was, he had learned, an old human phrase, a promise that some things were worth fighting for. a declaration that surrender was not an option. It was, in short, the perfect summary of why humanity could never be conquered. 50 years after first contact, the galaxy had changed. The consortium had expanded, incorporating new species and new ideas. But perhaps no change was more significant than the influence of humanity. Human innovation had revolutionized consortium technology. Human diplomacy had resolved conflicts that had lasted for centuries. Human art and culture had spread across 1,000 worlds. And human soldiers had proven themselves time and again as defenders of the innocent. But more than any single achievement, humanity had brought something intangible to the galaxy: hope. On a colony world at the edge of consortium space, a mixed settlement of humans and Quillians faced a new threat: raiders from an unaligned system, attacking without warning or mercy. The colonial defense force was small, undermanned, and outgunned. The human commander, Captain James Wu, stood before his mixed-species unit. "I won't lie to you," he said. "We're outnumbered 3-1. We're outgunned, and reinforcements won't arrive for at least 4 days. The enemy expects us to surrender." He smiled grimly. "But they don't know who they're dealing with. They don't know that this colony is protected by consortium defenders, who learned from the best warriors in the galaxy. They don't know that we've trained together, bled together, and become something more than just humans or Quillians. We've become brothers and sisters in arms." A Quillian soldier raised a tentacle. "What are your orders, Captain?" "We hold," Wu said simply. "We hold this colony until reinforcements arrive. We protect every civilian, every child, every innocent life here, and we show these raiders what happens when you threaten people under consortium protection." The battle lasted 3 days. The defenders used every tactic humanity had perfected over millennia of warfare. They used terrain to their advantage. They set ambushes. They fought with creativity and courage. The Quillian defenders learned human battle cries and used them to terrify the enemy. The human defenders learned Quillian tactical patterns and incorporated them seamlessly. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found the colony intact and the raiders either captured or fled. Captain Wu, wounded but alive, made his report. "The defenders performed magnificently," he said. "Every single one of them." The raiders expected easy prey. Instead, they found warriors. The commanding officer of the relief force, a Zarthian admiral, nodded approvingly. "Your report will be commended, Captain. You held against impossible odds." Wu shook his head. "Not impossible, sir. Difficult, yes, but not impossible, because we're not alone anymore. Because when humans fight alongside our allies, when we share our knowledge and learn from theirs, there's nothing we can't overcome." The story of the colony's defense spread across the consortium. It became another legend, another example of what was possible when different species worked together, and it reinforced the lesson that humanity had taught 50 years earlier: that determination and courage could overcome any obstacle. 100 years after first contact, historians looked back at the day humanity entered the galactic stage with violence and defiance. They studied the battles, the diplomatic negotiations, the cultural exchanges that followed. And they came to understand that the galaxy had been forever changed. Dr. Sarah Chen, a human xenohistorian, published a paper that became required reading in universities across the consortium. Its title was simple: How Earth Changed the Galaxy. Her conclusion was profound. When humanity refused to surrender to the Zarthian fleet, they did more than save their own planet. They changed the fundamental assumptions of galactic civilization. Before humanity, the consortium operated on the principle that technological advancement equated to superiority. Advanced species helped primitive ones, yes, but always from a position of assumed superiority. Humanity shattered that assumption. They proved that technology is merely one factor among many. They proved that spirit, determination, and creativity matter just as much as superior weapons. They proved that a species' worth cannot be measured by their technology level, but must be judged by their character. In doing so, they forced the consortium to reevaluate everything. New protocols were established for first contact. New laws were passed to protect emerging species. New attitudes developed about cooperation versus domination. But perhaps most importantly, humanity brought a new perspective to the galaxy. They brought their history of overcoming impossible odds. They brought their tendency to ask what if, and why not. They brought their refusal to accept that anything is truly impossible. 100 years later, the galaxy is a better place because humanity refused to surrender. Because they fought back. Because they showed us that even the smallest, weakest, most primitive species deserves respect and dignity. Congratulations, humanity. You declared war on the galaxy's assumptions and won. Closing narration. And so the story of humanity's first contact with the galactic community became legend. It was taught in schools across 1,000 worlds. It was studied by military academies and diplomatic corps. It was told around campfires on colony worlds where humans and aliens lived side by side. The lesson was simple, but profound. Never underestimate the human spirit. Never assume that technology alone determines strength. And never ever threaten a species that has spent its entire existence learning how to survive against impossible odds. Because when you do, you're not just declaring war on a planet. You're declaring war on a spirit that refused to die through ice ages and plagues, through wars and disasters, through every challenge that evolution could throw at a species. You're declaring war on humanity. And as the Zarthian Empire learned to its cost, that is a war you cannot win. The galaxy is vast, filled with wonders and dangers beyond imagination, but somewhere in that vast expanse orbiting an unremarkable yellow star is a small blue planet. A planet that proved that size doesn't matter, that technology doesn't guarantee victory, that the greatest weapon any species possesses is the refusal to give up. That planet is Earth, and its people are human, and they are survivors. Author's note: this is an original HFY, Humanity Fuck Yeah, science fiction story. All characters, species, and events are fictional. The story explores themes of human resilience, cooperation, and the dangers of underestimating others based on superficial assessments.